everyone. All right, let's go ahead and let's review. All right, so your class, so your homework, let's go through that section first. You had on page, well, you had in the chapter 9 review. That's on page number, I wrote down chapter 9, but I didn't write down the pages for it. So the chapter 9 review, it was on page number 132. So you had the people 1 through 14. You had odd for that section. So let's go through that section first off for it. So 1 through 14 odd. All right, Thomas Jefferson. So you're just supposed to write up what was something important from this particular chapter from it. So if you didn't get this exact thing, you want to know this, okay, because Thomas Jefferson appears over and over in the chapters, then you want to know what's important for this chapter. So he was elected the 3rd president of the United States. He was involved with the Louisiana Purchase. He had the election of 1800 when it was thrown into the House of Representatives. So note all those things about Thomas Jefferson with the year 1800, that particular election. Now he did do a lot of other things. We'll make it up for this chapter. That's the important things. All right, John Marshall, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He decided Marbury versus Madison. Remember, that's the first time the Supreme Court used judicial review or said something was unconstitutional. All right, Robert R. Livingston. Well, sorry, number 2 was even. So if you did number 2, fantastic. If not, you didn't have to. Number 3, Robert R. Livingston, that was Jefferson's minister in France, so he was involved in the Louisiana Purchase with James Monroe. Number 5, Zebulon Pike, he explored the upper part of Mississippi and the southern part of the Louisiana Territory. So remember, Lewis and Clark, they did the northern portion. The Zebulon Pike, he did the southern portion for it. All right, number 7, Stephen Decatur, he was the best-known hero of the Tripolitan War, so make a note for him. Number 9, Tecumseh. He was the Shawnee chief who tried to establish a confederation of the Native American tribes to fight against the Americans. He was defeated and was killed in the War of 1812. Did you write down which particular battle it was? Alright, so make a note though that the particular battle that he was killed at was at the Battle of the Thames. So make a note for that as well. So hopefully you wrote down all that information about him. Alright, number 11, Oliver Hazard Perry, he was American leader at the Battle of Lake Erie. What's the famous quote that you need to know for him? We have met the enemy and they are saying that they're going to defeat them. So make a note for that. Alright, number 13, Francis Scott Key. He wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. So hopefully you got all those major ideas down for those people. Alright, so the chapter 8 review, you had to do, you had work on the people 1 through 8. So again, Thomas Jefferson again, but what's the major thing about Thomas Jefferson in this chapter? He was the first Secretary of State. Alexander Hamilton, what did he do? First Secretary of the Treasury. He also put America on the financial plan, trying to get us back to having a good credit with other nations and trying to stabilize our economy. Henry Knox, what did he do? First Secretary of War. Edmund Randolph, what did he do? First Attorney General. Samuel Osgood, what did he do? First Postmaster General, know these people. John Jay, what did he do? First Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Anthony Wayne, what did he do? He defeated the Native Americans at the Battle of Fallen Timber, so Mad Anthony Wayne, make a note for him. And then Aaron Burr, what did he do? Jefferson's vice president after the election of 1800 went to the House of Representatives. Also, remember, he was involved in the Burr conspiracy, but that's in the next chapter. All right, so for your classwork, I'm going to give you a little bit of classwork as well. Try to help you to be thinking about this section and to get you get going in this section, because I'm going to do a lot of terms and definitions. So for the chapter 7 review, so flip over to chapter 7 review section. That is on page, I should have written page numbers, that would have been helpful. All right, so the chapter 7 review, you're going to answer the people 1 through 11, all of them. So 1 through 11 all, it should only take you about 5 to 10 minutes though, so don't spend too long on it. So maybe 10, 13, 14 minutes, maybe, but don't spend longer than 15. So try to find out, remember, okay, what did John Dickinson do? What did Daniel Shays do? So write down what's the important facts about them. So go ahead and pause the video, and then come back whenever that is finished, and we'll talk through some of them. All right. So if you're still here, I'm assuming that you have already finished that. So people 1 through 11 for the chapter 7 review on page 104. All right, so John Dickinson, he led the committee on the proposed the Articles of Confederation. Now remember, Dickinson, he also did something else that was in a previous chapter. Remember, he wrote letters from a farmer in Pennsylvania to the inhabitants of the British colonies. All right, Daniel Shays, he led Shays' Rebellion. Make a note about him. Alexander Hamilton, He urged all states to send delegates to the convention in Philadelphia for this chapter. Now remember, Alexander Hamilton does a lot. He also helps write the Federalist Papers. So just make a note for that. James Madison, Virginia, who urged all states to send delegates to a convention in Philadelphia as well, also wrote the Federalist Papers. And remember, they were for the Constitution. Jonathan Dayton, he was the youngest delegate at the Constitutional Convention at the age of 26. Edmund Randolph, he proposed the Virginia Plan. Make a note for that one, seeking a bicameral legislature. William Patterson, he proposed the New Jersey Plan, seeking a unicameral legislature. Also thinking back over it, you want to know what those different plans are as well. So the New Jersey Plan, that was also known as a small state plan, while the Virginia Plan was more for the large states because it was based on state population. So note those ideas with them as well. Noah Webster, he wrote to a young man about the importance of the Bible and leadership. So he has kind of that blurb about him in this textbook. And then Isaac Backus, remember, he was the Baptist leader who fought for religious freedom in Massachusetts. John Lillan, he was the Baptist leader who helped persuade James Madison to support adding the Bill of Rights. So he was a religious leader in Virginia. Alright, Alexis de Tocqueville, he was the Frenchman who wrote Democracy in America. So hopefully you got all those major ideas down. You might have put down something else, but make sure you want to know the major ideas for them. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's review. I'm going to start and I'm going to go chapter by chapter. The best way to do this, because I'm filming it and because there's so much material, the best way is I'm just going to go chapter by chapter and I'm going to ask a question, either mark it in your book or write down the answer somewhere on a piece of paper or something else to help you to remember, okay, what am I supposed to be studying? What am I supposed to be learning from this section? That's typically the best way to handle reviews like this. Since I can't ask you questions directly, the best way is to just do it chapter by chapter. Alright, so if you're writing in your textbook, turn over to page 117. We'll start there with chapter 9. This is the most recent chapter, or if you want to write on a piece of paper, chapter 9. And just write down all of the bold terms that I go over, or all of the terms that I go over, ideas, dates, anything. Or you can keep up with me and mark it in your book. That also works. Alright, so the age of Jefferson. Alright, so remember, who was his Secretary of State? James Madison. Who was his Secretary of the Treasury? Robert Gallatin. Good job. Alright, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court during this time? John Marshall. What was the court case whenever this is the first time they said unconstitutional, we're using judicial review? Marbury versus Madison. So Marbury, that's how you spell it and pronounce it, versus Madison. So be careful for that. Alright, name the two people that went to France to go negotiate about buying New Orleans. Alright, Robert R. Livingston and James Monroe. How much did we end up paying for Louisiana, approximately? $15 million. Alright, was the Louisiana Purchase a strict interpretation of the Constitution or a loose interpretation? Now remember, we use strict construction or loose construction. So Louisiana Purchase, strict construction or loose construction? Loose, because technically it's nowhere in the Constitution saying the federal government can buy land. So it's a loose construction, it's implied. Alright, what is the year for the Louisiana Purchase? 1803. Who were the two people that explored the northern portion of Louisiana Purchase? Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. Who explored the southern portion of the Louisiana Purchase? Zebulon Pike. Who was the Shoshone woman that helped out Lewis and Clark? Sacagawea. Alright, who was the person that was involved in creating a Western Empire? Plus, he shot Alexander Hamilton. Aaron Burr, so he was involved in the Burr conspiracy, creating out the empire, and then also he shot Alexander Hamilton. Who was the best known hero of the Tripolitan War? Stephen Decatur. Alright. What were the orders or the decree that Napoleon said, saying if you're an ally of France, you can't trade with Great Britain? So that's the Berlin Decree. What were the orders or the decrees that England said, okay, if you're a neutral ship, you have to stop at our ports first before you go over to France? Those are the orders in council. To follow that up, Napoleon issued another decree saying, okay, if you're a neutral ship, you can't trade with Great Britain. Those are the Milan decrees. Alright, what was the act that almost bankrupted the American economy by saying we couldn't trade with any other nation? It's passed under Thomas Jefferson. Embargo Act. Good job. Alright, who was the 4th president of the United States? James Madison. Alright, what was the act that Napoleon used to force us to have conflict with Great Britain? It's an act, technically it's a bill. The Macon Bill. So make a note of that. To where Napoleon decided he could use this to basically force conflict between Great Britain and the United States. Alright, name one of the war hawks. People that wanted to go to war with Great Britain. Henry Clay and John C. Calhoun. Make a note for that. What section of the country did not want to go to war against Great Britain? So you have the Northeast, the South, and the West. Northeast, South, West. It's really hard to gesture whenever I'm looking at the camera. Northeast. Good job. Alright, who was known for the Battle of Tippecanoe? Who was our general? The Americans. William Henry Harrison. So make a note for him. So William Henry Harrison. Let's see. Alright, who said we have met the enemy and they are ours? He was the leader, or the major American at the Battle of Lake Erie. Oliver Hazard Perry, good job. What ship was nicknamed Old Ironsides? Because the cannonballs bounced off the side, so it appeared to be made of iron. USS Constitution, good job. Who defeated the British at the Battle of New Orleans? Andrew Jackson, good job. His nickname was Old Hickory. What is the year for the Battle of New Orleans? 1815. So good job. The Battle of New Orleans, 1815. What was the convention to where the northern states said we have the right to nullify an act of Congress? They never actually did, but they said we have the right to do that. That's the Hartford Convention. Who was the first lady that she acted with great wisdom and I guess honor during a time of chaos, and she packed important documents as she left the White House and took George Washington's portrait? Dolly Madison. Alright, what was the treaty that ended the War of 1812, even though it's technically 1814 by this point? Alright, Treaty of Ghent. So just make a note for that. Alright, what year was that? 1814. So don't forget, for the War of 1812, it went from 1812 to 1814, for the Battle of New Orleans, 1815. So make note of all of those. Alright, there are several benefits from the War of 1812. What were they? We gained respect for foreign nations, the war stimulated American industry, the war created a new spirit of patriotism, and the war stimulated westward expansion. Note all those things. Alright, that's mostly everything from chapter 9. So if you want to draw a line in your notes, or if you want to flip to chapter 8 now, I'm going to work up from there. Chapter 8 starts on page 105, so we're going to go from there up through it. Alright, so again, keep in mind, if I'm moving too quick and you need to pause and rewind, that's fine as well. So if you need to pause and rewind to get all the information you can, but I want to try to give you as much information as possible. I know whenever we Zoom, which I plan on Zooming on Thursday, whenever we use Zoom, it slows down so much. So I'm trying to get through as much information as possible. So hopefully on Thursday we can just do like a spot check review to make sure that you know all the really important stuff. Okay, so what was the temporary capital of the United States of America? New York City. Alright, we just went through all these. You gotta know all the first. Who was the first president? George Washington. Who was the first Secretary of State? Thomas Jefferson. Who was the first Secretary of the Treasury? Alexander Hamilton. Who was the first Secretary of War? Henry Knox. Who was the first Attorney General? Edmund Randolph. Who was the first Postmaster General? Samuel Osgood. And then who was the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? John Jay. Gotta know your first. Make sure that you know them. Alright, Alexander Hamilton, he was responsible for putting our country back on a sturdy economic plan. Oops, there goes my post-it. There were 3 basic parts to it. So payment of the public debt was a major one, creation of the national bank, and then also he wanted to do protective tariffs. He never wanted to just tax people. So just make a note though that those are kind of like the 3 major parts of it. So payment of the public debt, creating of the national bank, and then also using protective tariffs. So those are the 3 major ideas. So taxing other people coming into the United States and those protective tariffs, but not necessarily just taxing the American people. So just make a note of those 3 things. So protective tariffs, national bank, and paying off the foreign debt. Alright, so we talked about strict construction versus loose construction already, so I'm going to move on from that. Let's see. Alright, if you supported Alexander Hamilton, what party were you part of? Where you had loose construction of the Constitution, you wanted the National Bank, and you supported Hamilton's ideas. What party were you considered part of? Federalists. What if you supported Thomas Jefferson's ideas with the idea of strict construction of the Constitution? You didn't like the National Bank. What was your party's name? Democratic, Republicans, or just Republicans? So make a note of that. So Thomas Jefferson, strict construction with the Democratic Republicans, and Alexander Hamilton, loose construction, National Bank, and then he was for, I lost my train of thought. Not the Constitution, they were both for it, but Federalists in this chapter stood for, you stood for those ideas. With the idea of Alexander Hamilton, you're following strict loose construction of Alexander Hamilton, and you wanted the National Bank. Alright. Let's see, what do we call the events in France whenever you had basically just anarchy because they had mob rule? What do we call that whole time period in France? It's very rocky. Reign of Terror. Alright, who was sent to go negotiate with Great Britain, keep us out of the war, keep us out of conflict with Great Britain at this time period? John Jay, and he had the Jay Treaty. Alright, who was sent to make a treaty with Spain? Thomas Pinckney, and he got the Pinckney Treaty. Alright, so do make a note though, Anthony Wayne with the Battle of Fallen Timber, it's the top of page 112, make a note of him. Alright, so what was special with the election where you had someone receive, where you had we had a president and a vice president from 2 different parties? This is the only time in history where we have this elected. Alright, so election of 1796, so remember Adams, he got the most votes, Thomas Jefferson's was the second most, and he was vice president. This is the only time in history where we have president and vice president from 2 different parties being chosen by elections. So I'll make a note though, it was Adams and Thomas Jefferson was his vice president. Alright, what do we call that whole event whenever we sent 3 people over to France to keep us out of war with France, but the French government wouldn't even meet with us and they wanted a large bribe? The XYZ affair. Alright, what was the act that said that you couldn't publish false, scandalous, or malicious statements against the government, Congress, or the president? This was aimed specifically at the Republican newspapers. The Sedition Act. Alright, what is the election? This is the only election where we have the president and the vice president, well, excuse me, 2 different candidates tied, so it gets tossed into the House of Representatives, and they choose. This is the election of 1800s. Make a note, there's Thomas Jefferson as president, Aaron Burr as vice president, and then one amendment is passed so we don't get things like this happening again. The 12th Amendment. Make a note of that. What is the Judiciary Act that called for the creation of 16 new federal judgeships? And since they're trying to fill them at the last second, they were known as the midnight appointments or the midnight judges. What Judiciary Act was that? 1803. Alright, that's it for pretty much for chapter 8. Chapter 7, if you want to draw a line in your notes. Whew. I'm talking too quick. I'm hyperventilating. I need to slow down and breathe. Alright, chapter 7. Alright, so for this section, we're talking about the critical period and the construction. It's on page 88 if you want to follow along and mark in your textbook, or if you just want to draw a line in your notes. Either way it works. Alright, so what is a confederacy? This is whenever you have the states, they are all basically on equal footing together. So in a confederacy, the central government is subordinate to the local government, and so they have more power than the federal government. There was 3 problems with the Articles of Confederation that bound us together. So what were they? You had to have at least 9 states to approve a measure before it could be passed by Congress. The central government had no executive or judicial branch, and the Confederation Congress lacked the power to attach and perform other essential duties. Who wrote the Articles of Confederation? John Dickinson. Make a note for that. Alright, what was the ordinance that provided for the entire Northwest Territory to be surveyed and divided into townships? Land Ordinance of 1785. Good job. What was the ordinance then that provided whenever you had people move into the territory, it'd be no less than 3 states and no more than 5. Northwest Ordinance of 1787. Good job. Alright, who led the rebellion during the critical period? Shays. So Daniel Shays, make a note for that. What is the dates for the critical period? What's the years? So make a note for these. So through 1789. So that's the dates for the critical period. So make a note. I don't remember if I ever made you memorize the dates before. I don't remember if I talked about, I know I referenced them, but I don't know if I ever made you memorize them. So just note though that if something happens in this time period, it's part of the critical period. Alright, so what was the name for what's the year for the Constitutional Convention? What's the year for the Constitutional Convention? So the year is 1787. I think I'm just going to write all the dates up on the side. I think that'll help. So I'll leave these up. So 1787. It's going to bother me how they're out of order. 1787, that's the Constitutional Convention. Some of the dates we've already talked about. You make a note. You're going to see if I write down here. Yeah, you will be. Alright, I can't write. Oh, I can't do that. I'm going to write it over here. I'm getting too old to bend like that. 1812 to 1814, so the War of 1812, 1815, the Treaty of Ghent, and then, 1803, Louisiana Purchase. I think that's all the dates we've talked about so far, besides the elections and the acts. So make a note for those elections and acts. Okay, so Constitutional Convention, 1787, so make a note for that year. Alright, who was known as the father of the Constitution? James Madison. Who was the youngest delegate? Jonathan Dayton. Who was the oldest delegate? Benjamin Franklin. Make a note for those people. Alright, who proposed the New Jersey Plan? This is called the Small State Hand, Small State Plan, because it would have favored the small states. As a side note, this one is also very close to how the Articles of Confederation are written. It's the most similar. Alright, that's the that was William Patterson, so make a note of him. So William Patterson, also note that the New Jersey Plan was the closest to the Articles of Confederation. Who proposed the Virginia Plan, saying that it should be based on state population? Large state plan. Edmund Randolph. What was the name for the compromise? Where we said, okay, we're going to have two different parts of the Congress then. You're going to have it to where there is a part based on states, where everyone gets two, and then a part based on state population. Alright, so that's the Connecticut Compromise. Make a note of that. The national government will consist of two houses, also known as the Great Compromise. So either name is good. Just make sure, though, if you can see it as a multiple choice, you can recognize Great Compromise, or Connecticut Compromise. Alright, what was the compromise that established that 3/5 of the state population will be counted for both taxation and representation? 3/5 compromise. Alright, what is the name for the people who supported the Constitution? Federalists. What is the name for the people that did not want the Constitution? Anti-Federalists. Good job. Alright, who said, Alright. No, I'm not going to ask it that way. I'll come back to that later on. Alright, which state ratified the Constitution first, claiming the title of first state? Delaware. What was the last state to ratify the Constitution? Rhode Island. Alright. What year was the Bill of Rights added? You can write down another date now. What year was the Bill of Rights added? 1791. So 1791 Bill of Rights is added. So make a note for that. There are 3 branches of government. Which branch makes the laws? Legislative branch and Congress. Which branch carries out the laws? Executive branch is the president. Which branch interprets the law to basically say, is this constitutional or non-constitutional? Supreme Court. Alright, so let's say that Congress passes a bad law. How do we get rid of it? Or tries to pass a bad law? The president can veto it, and the Supreme Court can say unconstitutional. Let's say president, he doesn't want these laws to be passed, and he becomes power hungry and just starts vetoing everything. Well, the Supreme Court could say unconstitutional, you're not supposed to do it that way. Or the Senate and House of Representatives, they can overthrow his veto by a 2/3 majority vote. So it's a good way they can balance out each other. Alright, what happens if the Supreme Court is getting too much power? The president can appoint judges as they die, so that's part of the reason why it's important right now. And then also, you can have Congress basically fire a Chief Justice if they need to. Alright, let's see. Alright, so by this time in our country, did we have complete separation of church and state yet? Not yet. So this is whenever we officially decide, okay, we need to have separation of church and state. To force it isn't going to work. So a lot of cases, a lot of people assume that happened with the Great Awakening. No, it didn't happen until this time period. So that was not an effect of the Great Awakening, separation of church and state. That comes later. Alright, so who is the leader of the Baptist Massachusetts? Isaac Backus. Who is the leader of the Baptist in Maryland, in Virginia? John Lillian, so make a note for him. Who wrote Democracy in America? Alexis de Tocqueville. Alright, that's finished chapter 7. We're doing great. I think I have time for one more chapter, maybe two. I know it's a little bit overwhelming, so I'll probably just do just one more chapter, then I'll stop. Alright, chapter number 6. Ooh, maybe not. Chapter number 6 is pretty long. Alright, chapter number 6, page 73. Alright. So, getting into this section, who wrote Common Sense? Thomas Paine, good job. Who proposed the resolution that we should just become independent? Richard Henry Lee. What is the year for the signing of the Declaration of Independence? Actually, this is a date you need to know all the way. So, signing of the Declaration of Independence. July 4th, 1776. My dates are going to be all out of order. Okay, I'm going to move these up. So, critical period. Okay, so these were over here now. So I'll leave those there. So I'll just write backwards from here. So, July 4th, 1776. Okay, well at least that's in order. So, July 4th, 1776. Nope, that looks worse. July 4th, 1776. Nope, wrong direction. There. That way you can see it all. So, July 4th, 1776. I'll try to remember to stand away from these in a minute as well. So, July 4th, 1776 was the signing of the Declaration of Independence. This one said why we're breaking away from England. Because Parliament was trying to enforce their laws on us, and we never had that, and the king was supporting them. Alright, who wrote Commentaries on the Laws of England? Lots of people missed this on the last test, you better know this. William Blackstone, make a note of him. Alright, what was the difference between John Locke's work and William Blackstone? William Blackstone said that the law of nature comes from God. John Locke, he said more of it's based on reason of if it makes sense, then it must be a good law. So the idea of John Locke with the idea of it's more based on reason. William Blackstone said that it's based on the law of nature. That matches up with the idea of the Bible. All right. What was an advantage for us, the Patriots, during the War for Independence? There are 3 of them that your book gives. Alright, so strategic and popular support. Well, that's kind of 2. Strategic advantage and popular support, experienced military leaders, and foreign aid. So your book kind of lumps 2 of them together. So there's technically 4. Which country proved to be America's most valuable ally? France. Good job. What were some of our disadvantages? We had 3 major ones. Lack of unity, financial problems, and maintaining an army. Alright, who was our superintendent of finance? Robert Morris. Who was the financier who contributed to the Patriot cause? He was a Polish Jew. Haym Salomon. Alright. What was the battle or the city where George Washington captured the Hessians on Christmas night in 1776? It's not really a battle per se, because it's not labeled like that, but what city did he capture them in? Battle of Trenton. Good job. Who was the spy that was disguised as a Dutch school teacher, and he said, I regret I only have one life to lose for my country? Nathan Hale. Make a note for him. Let's see. Alright, who was the American general that turned traitor? Benedict Arnold. Alright, who was the Patriot leader at the Battle of Saratoga? Horatio Gates. What was important about the Battle of Saratoga? It was the turning point in America's war for independence. Alright, where did Washington spend the winter of 1777 to 1778? Valley Forge, good. Alright, who replaced Howe as the commander-in-chief in the British forces in America? Sir Henry Clinton. Who helped fight on the British side during the War for Independence? Which Native American? Joseph Brant. Good job. Alright, who captured the British ship, who captured the British ship Serapis, and he had his own ship named the Lahome Richard, and he said, I have not yet begun to fight. You know all the things about it. John Paul Jones. Who was known as the Swamp Fox? Francis Marion. Who was known as the Gamecock? That was Thomas Sumter. Who was known as the Fighting Quaker? General Nathaniel Greene. At what battle was the war virtually over? The Battle of Yorktown. Who was the Frenchman that helped out Washington at the Battle of Yorktown? Comte de Rochambeau. What year was the Battle of Yorktown? This basically ended the War for Independence. Technically it's not officially over, but this is the major area. This is the major event that basically wrapped it up. 1781. Oh, I'll shove it in here. 1781. So that is the Battle of Yorktown. Alright, which Treaty of Paris was it that ended the War for Independence? Remember, there's two Treaty of Parises. What Treaty of Paris ended the War of Independence? 1783. So 1783, I'm just going to draw it off to the side. No, I'm just right above. 1783, that's the year for the Treaty of Paris that officially ended the war with Great Britain. Alright, so who regained Florida at the end of the War for Independence? Spain. Let's see. I think that's the major event for chapter 6. So we did a very good job. We made through a lot of it. Okay, because we went through so much, and I know it's a lot of material, I'll go ahead and I'll stop there. So your homework for tonight is going to be the chapter 5 review, people 1 through 14 even. So chapter 5 on page number 72. So chapter 5 review on page 72. The 1 through 14 for the people even. So even. And then on page 59, you're going to do people, the 1 through 11, all of them. You can do all of them. So on page 59, 1 through 11 for all the people, you'll be fine. So all together, so it's on page 72, chapter 5 review, the people 1 through 14, even. On page 59, the chapter 4 review, the people 1 through 11, all of them. You'll be okay. I'm letting you go early. Alright, so be steady and stay on top of it. So I will see you on Thursday with the Zoom meeting, because that's what I plan on doing it. So I'm going to get through most of the rest of the material tomorrow, and then we'll spot check it on